Alright friends, it is time for another book review and this one won't rhyme. No, seriously, I'm not rapping this one. Sorry. Intro. First and foremost, thank you for all of the kind comments on my most recent book review rap. It's probably best not to ask me why I decided to rap that particular book review. It was honestly just one of those ideas that occurred to me when I woke up in the morning and it wouldn't go away. And when you have an idea like that, the only thing to do is to see it through to its conclusion. And that's what I did. So now we're back to regular old crooked framed... I hate my tripod. Now we're back to regular old book reviews with the favorites list, and the next book on the favorites list is Paper Towns by John Green. So I don't know if any of you have had this problem, but when I was reading Paper Towns in the various public places where I was this week, I was kind of hoping that nobody would ask me the usual questions that people ask you when they come up to you when you're reading a book. Oh, what's that about? Now, with a lot of books on my favorites list, that's a pretty simple and straightforward answer. Oh, it's about this guy who randomly and spontaneously travels through time and how he tries to make a marriage work with that. Oh, it's about this girl who lives in Nazi Germany in World War II and learns how to read by stealing books from Nazi book burnings. Oh, it's about this group of 3 friends, one of whom finds out that she's a lesbian and starts dating one of the other friends. You know, it's pretty easy to give a brief synopsis in the 5 to 10 seconds that it takes for the person to completely lose interest in what you're talking about. But how do you do that with Paper Towns? Well, it's about this girl named Margot Roth Spiegelman and how a bunch of people kind of radically misinterpret her. Yeah, that doesn't exactly sound like the fascinating book that it is. So if any of you figure out a way to briefly synopsize? Is that a word? It is now. If any of you figure out a way to briefly synopsize this book in a way that will make it interesting to the average passersby, let me know. Anyway, on to the review. So basically the book is about how we radically misinterpret each other. And when I say that the book is about it, what I really mean is the book is saturated with this point. Seriously, I think next time I read this book, I'm actually going to make a list of all of the times in which John Green makes the point that we radically misinterpret each other. But the nice thing is that it's not done in such a way that he's shoving the point down your throat, because when I first read the book, you know, I got the point, but it wasn't like I felt as though it was being imposed upon me. This point is made through basic plot elements, through funny plot elements, and they still relate to the story. They're not just there for the sake of, oh, hi, here's the point. I'll give you some examples. The Bloody Ben story. The fact that Radar is still called Radar, despite the fact that he no longer looks like Radar. The House Full of Black Santas. Omnictionary, a site where people can vandalize freely based on their own perceptions of knowledge. The fact that Q's parents are therapists and it is therefore their job to try to understand and perceive other people. The various games that the group plays, like That Guy is a Gigolo, Metaphysical I Spy, and the game where they try to top each other with their metaphors. Quite possibly one of my favorite examples of this point is the character of Lacey. Lacey is introduced in the beginning as Margot's former best friend who pretty much betrayed her. As it turns out, that was just Margot's perception, but as far as we, the readers, are concerned, Lacey is a popular Decepticon-ish person who is going to be an antagonist throughout the entire story. And of course, that ends up not being the case at all. Not only is Lacey not an antagonistic character, she actually becomes one of the circle of friends. The circle that we are led to believe is only going to include Q, Ben, and Radar now also includes Lacey, a popular person. And so that befuddles the expectations not only of Quentin, Ben, and Radar, but also the readers. Because we've read these kinds of books where the protagonists are basically geeks, and so therefore the popular people, the beautiful people, are going to be the antagonists of the story. And so we expect Lacey to be no different, but in fact, she is. One of the things I enjoyed watching in the book this time around was Quentin's growth throughout the book. John Green sets up Quentin's character pretty well in the first chapter. Everything in the first chapter points to a very analytical, very routine-oriented mind. He describes, point by point, these details of his perfectly ordinary evening. And then, all of that changes. Margot shows up at his window, takes him on a whirlwind, all-night adventure, pulling pranks, breaking into SeaWorld, doing all this stuff. And then the next day, Margot is gone, and Quentin's character has changed. Because now he is stepping into the role that Margot was in for so long as Chuck Parson puts it at one point, puppet master. And there's a scene where he's standing in the hall by his locker and he feels for the first time like he really owns the school. Like, he really has a say in what goes on there. And then he follows the clues to find Margot, and he goes to the mini mall, and then there's another transition when Quentin steps into another role that Margot fulfilled. Blue Margot, as opposed to Yellow Margot. That transition, by the way, is marked in present tense. I love present tense. And it isn't until the end of the second part of the novel where Quentin starts to realize that he cannot truly understand Margot Roth Spiegelman, this girl that he has lived next door to all this time. Throughout the novel, there are 3 types of paper towns that are specifically mentioned. The first type of paper town is the type of paper town that Margot sees in Orlando, this kind of superficial, very pretty, but ultimately very empty place. The second paper town, the pseudo-divisions that Quentin explores looking for Margot, the unfinished, abandoned areas that could have been something but ended up not being anything. And then, of course, there's the paper town that Agloe, New York represents, the copyright trap that purely exists on a map but doesn't exist anywhere else in real life, completely fictitious. Q's perception of Margot can be seen through these 3 types of paper towns. He sees her as the awesome and pretty but generally superficial girl that she portrays to the entire school. He sees her as the broken and abandoned and generally desolate girl that the pseudo-divisions represent. And then he ultimately sees her as this girl who really only exists as other people perceive her. In other words, a paper town that's still kind of searching for an identity. And there's another point to be made here too, which is that misperception is kind of a two-way street. It wasn't just that everybody was misinterpreting Margot, it was that Margot was helping them along with misinterpreting her. So the persona that we put forth, the mask that we put on, the vessel that we hide in, these are all things that we do to help people misinterpret us. It's a two-way thing. In a lot of ways, this book is kind of a companion to Looking for Alaska. Not because it follows the same characters or the same story or anything like that, but because it takes a point that was made in Looking for Alaska and kind of builds on it. Paper Towns, in a way, kind of moves past Looking for Alaska. Kind of like Q's car moved past that jackknife truck. Did you catch that? There was a jackknife truck that they moved past. In that same way, this story moves past the death portion of Looking for Alaska and invites us to try to understand and perceive people correctly while they're still alive. And so there is a wonderful message to be had in this book, and it's a book that I think that everybody should read, Paper Towns by John Green. Obviously, it's still a favorite. And the next book on the favorite books review list is going to be If on a Winter's Night a Traveler by Italo Calvino. This one's pretty trippy. I'll see you next time. You're loud and annoying. Stupid FedEx truck. That's why I use UPS.